Um, let's move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Professor Dr. He Yufei, and Dr. Ho has been the past president of the Hong Kong College of Emergency Medicine. He was also the chief of service of A&E in Queen Elizabeth Hospital, and also the deputy hospital HCE in QEH from 2013 to 2019. He is a very good mentor, and when I was working at the academy, actually Dr. Ho gave me a lot of personal advice and suggestions, and I benefited a lot from Dr. Ho's advice. Dr. Ho, I think some of you may remember just before his retirement, he led the department in QEH to fight the fifth wave. And I think a lot of us have seen his dedication and his support to helping our COVID patients. So without further delay, let's welcome Dr. Ho. He's going to share with us on the topic of EM leadership. Thank you much.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Let me share the slide. I wish you can see the slide now. Right, okay. So first of all, thanks for the introduction and thanks for inviting me to speak at this topic, which I don't have a lot of academic research into it, but being not a leader, but being a person who was put in that position on multiple occasions, I do have some sharings, which I hope that I can enlighten some of the audience who is already embarking on this leadership role in future, or is actually starting this role in his career. Now, I won't keep you too long and save you some time for Q&A if possible, or for some of you, you might be some more time for your break for lunch too. Now, the first two speakers have presented the traits of leaders in dimension at a higher level. I would say that a successful EM leader serves potential and capability to go beyond. There are many examples out there locally in Hong Kong and worldwide, has illustrated in the slides and pictures and photos of the two speakers. Now, coming back to my topic, I would like to focus on EM leaderships, but basically and mainly on emergency medicine. Now, first of all, I'd like to ask you, maybe you don't need to answer me, but just ask yourself, if you are already in a leadership role, have any one of you got structured training or even an accreditations like a diploma, something like that, in leadership before you establish your role now in your organizations as a leader? Now, I think most of you were trained as a frontline clinical workers. I guess like me, your management and administrative capabilities are developed through your encounters, which you cannot avoid because of the seniority and connection in your services. I don't have much theoretical basis of leadership training, but some recent readings have found some matches, which I would like to share with you, and is share with my experience of having those roles in the organization. So now, first of all, I don't have any sort of conflict interest to declare. Now, EM leadership, there's two terms in it. One is the emergency medicine, one is the leaderships. I'd like to define what is the emergency medicine first, and we visit this definition of EM from IFEM. This is the definition of emergency medicine of the National Federation for Emergency Medicine. You can see there are some similarities between emergency medicine training and the role of the leader. Now, first of all, we need to have some knowledge and skills first to be an emergency physician I think you also need some knowledge and skills when you are embarking on the journey of being a leader. Now you need to deal with acute urgent situations, illnesses for emergency medicine, but for leaders like COVID and like other disaster situations, or even in a company run into crisis, you need to deal with them. This is the role of leader. You cannot refrain or withdraw yourself from those role and when it happened. Now we, as emergency physician, we have to deal with patients of all ages and all clinical illnesses. For leaders in any companies, in any organizations, you cannot say that this is not my role, this is not my portfolio, and I leave it to somebody else. You have to do it. Now, most of the time, as a emergency physician, we will deal with patients presented with undifferentiated clinical features, either physical disorders or behavioral disorders. They won't say that I belong to the specialty medicine, specialty of surgery. You have to face with this kind of undifferentiated situation and conditions, same to leaders. Many a time, until later on, you may not be able to know what is that problem, or even when the problem has not been identified, as a leader, you might have the sense or you might have the sensitivity to identify those undifferentiated features, which can help you and the organization to pass that particular status, which can be a crisis. Now, unlike other specialty in medicine, which has mainly deal with a problem of a specialty, but for emergency medicine, has highlighted by, I think, ESSO, that we have to deal with systems things too. Being a leaders or trainees in emergency medicine, we have to build up their capability in building systems or collaborating with systems or even change the systems when needed and develop that system first. So being an emergency physician, there's many traits of the leaders. So that's maybe the reason why so many emergency medicine experts subsequently in their career has switched to some sort of administration and leadership in the organizations. Now, for the second part of the equation of the topics today is about leaderships, which I think is much more difficult to define. Professor Warren Bennis was the university professor and distinguished professor of business administration and founding chairman of the Leadership Institute at the University of Southern California, USA. Now, I think he's actually a guru in leaderships, which I think many of the modern leadership roles and frameworks and views were developed through his research. Now, what he said is that leadership is like beauty. It is hard to define, but you know it when you see it. So imagine during your training, during your journey to your present positions, I will guarantee that you might have seen quite a lot of leaders that you admire. They have helped you and they have enlightened you how to go about it. But it is very difficult to give a definition of the leaders or leaderships in that sense. Now, but having said that, before we go to the deep into the discussion of leaderships, many people actually confuse themselves with what is leadership, what is management. And I would like to point out some differences between these two. Now, I'm not saying that leadership is over management or management is over leadership, but the meaning of management is easier to grasp sometimes. Management many times is deal with something in front of your eyes. That means you have a problem and issues to manage. Sometimes you may even have a staff that you think you have to manage. So it's something in front of your eye, the problem is there. But for leadership, it's something about future. So you have to look into as a leaders, I think you have, people are dependent on you to make some projections, some directions for the futures. But being a leaders, you need to translate this vision into reality, not only through others, more people's, but also through some of your management skills. So you cannot be just a leader, just talking, but not doing things, not managing the assets you have. And also leadership means that you are not working on your own. If you're just a one-man band, then I think this is not leaders. Because you need people, many people actually, depending on the size of your projects, to guide people through so that the future, the visions, the dream you have can be translated into or converted into reality. This is some of the examples of leadership versus management. There you can see that there's more sort of a practical issues on the management side, like short-term plans, like resources planning, like monitor performance. These are the day-to-day jobs of a lot of our managers. So if you mention this well, then you probably have a good framework or groundwork for you to develop your leadership role. But many of the time, this is not just one for the others. Many of the time, you will develop both the skills of management and leaders simultaneously. But you can look at the leadership side. You are trying to a more action type, like getting people to do things, leading by examples, communicating, inspiring, creating things, coaching people, and fostering teamwork. Sometimes this is kind of very active work, doing not just thinking without communicating. So leadership is something more on the future, while management is something on in front of your eyes. Now, although leadership is so difficult to define, but people try to measure leaderships. And as Dr. Cui, first speaker, has mentioned, this is commonly used in many companies. This is a 360-degree competence-based core leadership framework, which is used to measure the leadership skills of the leaders in many organizations, including Hospital Authority here in Hong Kong. Now, what is this? I would like to, I don't want to bother you with a lot of the content of this leadership framework, but there are some contents you probably need to know. Defining a leaders is not just by your own self or by your supervisors. You also need your peers or even subordinates to give you feedbacks. So in this 360-degree core leadership framework, you lead responsible from all these 4 groups of people. And they give you ratings on a number of dimensions. And the ratings has a 5-scale rating. First being extraordinary good, and 5 probably needs some development. Now, this is the 12 dimension mentions in this, or described in this competence 360 degrees competence-based framework. Now, now you can see these dimensions are traits of the leaders in an organization would like to measure, and there are quite a number of them. And some people may be particularly good in certain dimensions, but less good in others. But that's natural. I don't think there's anything wrong. And this is the whole concept of this framework, 360 degrees sort of feedback mechanism, is trying to identify those weak points so that leaders can improve. Now, usually a balanced score is expected for good leaders. You may not be good in all aspects, but hopefully it will be more balanced things. Okay. Now, I'd like to introduce another sort of measurement or competences expected for some exceptional leaders by this people called Mr. Carlson Dai. He is the president and CEO of an exceptional leadership company, who is a very good speaker. And there's many organizations, not only limited to the medical field, but also in the commercial field, inviting him to speak to his workers, usually the senior management, on how to build leaderships. Now, there are 16 critical competences to describe. If you look at those wordings, it's quite similar to the 12 dimensions in the 360-degree feedback competency framework. But he grouped it into 4 areas. The first area is about the own self. That means the leaders himself or herself. So you need to live the convictions, that means faith. You need to have emotional intelligence, which I think is very important for a good leader. You need to have good EI, and otherwise you probably may have problem with your colleagues or your subordinates. Now, vision is something very particular differences to the roles of being a managers. Many people can be a very good managers, managing people, managing finances, managing subjects, objects, and tasks. But to be a leader, you must have visions. And many a time, these visions are developed from outside your field. That means that if, just take for example, for some commercial organization, if you're just copying examples from other companies, you will never lead in your field. And if you really have this vision to develop something else, something new, or something particular, something different, then and of course that actually work and is compatible with your field too, then you will really a visionary. So sometimes the visions has to be come out of the box and go straight outside to your own field, and then probably sometimes people will translate some of those successful framework or works from other fields into your own fields, which can become a brand new things. So if you have a vision, you have to develop that visions, many times through readings, many times through attending meetings, conferences, and talking with people. And once you have those visions, you have to communicate with people you think important with the future. Many of time it's your staff, or sometimes it's your boss. And of course, you have to earn trust and loyalty. Now, being a leader, you have to work with people. If you don't want to work with people, I'm sorry, you cannot be a leader. And because you accomplish those visions through working with people, you cannot really just on yourself. So there are a number of things that you need to work with people, like especially important is to listen to people. If you really want to work with them, if you just talk and don't listen, people won't listen, and actually they will pay back by not listening to you. Now, execution is something related to your capability, and many of these execution capabilities build up when you during your journey to become a leader or manager in your divisions or in your organizations. So you need this kind of all this kind of capability of executing a plan or anything you think important to achieve the visions. So these are the basic skills that you need. So these are the 16 critical competencies if you want to be exceptional leaders in organization, which I agree. Now, going back to emergency medicine, those are the leadership theory which may be a bit boring to you, may not be applied to the medical field, but especially emergency medicine. But since my topic is on the emergency medicine leadership, I'd like to focus on two things out of the three. First is the teamwork, and I'll explain later. Contingency planning is something very important to EM, especially in this era of a pandemic for the past 2.5 years, that we really need skills and visions and all those collaborations with others in planning this contingency, which is not rare. If you are emergency physician, I'm guaranteed that in your career you will meet more than once or even a few times of this kind of contingency in your career. And the second thing I want to discuss in depth is about management of change. Because if you really want to change your visions, that many a time that visions needs to change. And making changes to not only yourself, but to your people around you is not an easy job. Now about teamwork. Now there's a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. This is shown on the right side of the slide, but I would rather be sort of emphasize on the good sides, the positive attributes. If we really want to become a functional team with good teamwork. So a good the teamwork required leaders to pass hope to your subordinates or peers. You have to give directions. You have to develop strength. Sometimes strength is not developed in one day, but in a period of time. Just like in emergency medicine, we have developed many of our residents into specialists and develop their strength into withstand stresses, withstand challenges when there's a contingency. It takes time to develop strength. Wisdom is something that cannot be grasped easily and cannot be taught. But through the leaders, if the leaders have this kind of wisdoms, I would say that their followers will sense what's the wisdom in the mind. And build up confidence in treating, in managing things, and or even in develop visions is very important. And the last but not the least is happiness. If the people cannot get the happiness out of the job, and the job can be very challenging, can be very long-lasting, can be very tiring. But if they cannot sense this kind of success or achievement, and through that they cannot get that kind of happiness, I think it is you cannot sustain. So building a good teamwork is very important for leaders in the emergency medicine field. So we have to respect each other, not because we are a team, simply not because we are working together. We have to respect each other and respect the difference of views, and respect the differences in looking at perspective, so that we can make our future plan or future visions, or modify that in a way that can be conducive to everyone. And most importantly, as an emergency physician, contribute to our patients. Now, I would like to take the last two slides. I would like to talk about changes. Now, every people know it's very difficult to make changes, and change by itself is a big subject. It may be a whole conference devoted to this subject of change. But my simple view is that when we try to change things, many times we focus on the technical challenges, how we do that, what is the steps that we have to go, how people should follow that step so that we can make that changes. I think that is not the difficult part. The difficult part is the adaptive part. That means that people can adapt to change. And why people cannot adapt to change is not because they don't know how to do it. It's because maybe sometimes because of the inertia, they don't want to change, or they feel safe if there's we do the things in the old way. But the most important thing in back of the mind is the fear of loss. Because they have been doing the job in that for example, for the past 10, 15 years, you want to change them to a whole new rules. They may feel there's a sense of loss. They may feel that they're insecure, unsafe, and they may make mistakes. So this is probably the psychological part, which we have to focus not only on the technical part. Technical part, I think most of the time we don't have any problem with that. But the problem is to make changes and make people to follow the changes, is to understand these adaptive challenges. But for adaptations, I think there's two perspectives. First is the attitudes. Second is the values. Now, attitudes and both of those take time to develop. So you might have to change or inspire or to make people share with you, be on your side with respect to the values of the changes that you're going to make. Like in the old days, when I joined this emergency medicine field like 30 years ago, people think that emergency medicine is just like a gateway to the hospital. So if we can just admit the patients, it will be safe for the patient, safe for us. Then what will happen to the patient in the wards, in the specialty, is not our concerns. So this kind of values has been in the days when we don't have this specialty, but we do have people working in the accident emergency department. That those are the values. How can you change them? Okay, you cannot change them within a day or two. Sometimes it takes months or years, and sometimes you need people to join with the same idea, to join your services, join the department, so that they can change their values. And of course, second thing is the attitudes. People may share with you your values, but they just don't want to change because of all those factors I mentioned: fear of loss, fear of unsafe. So even they want to change how fast they want to follow your paces and other things that may work with your attitudes and their attitudes too. Now, when we want to make changes, we will try with time, we try to change these values and attitudes so that the line of tolerance can be elevated. With time, sometimes people don't aware that they actually have this tolerance level grows with times because there's some subtle changes in the attitudes and values that can raise that. And also learning. We are all working in emergency physician. Most of them are very well-educated doctors, nurses, professionals, that we have a certain level of capability. And so we can actually can adopt a higher level of learning. But with time and with this persistence or perseverance in changing the attitudes and values, we can elevate this. Now, this is the zone of productivity. So if we can elevate this, and then as long as we are working within this level, not out of their tolerance level, or not out of their learning or the capability, learning capability they can produce. And with this, then you can lead your team to another level to step more close to your visions. So with that, I'd like to, this is the last time I'd like to share. So many a time, you don't just work on your own. You have to lead your team and let your team and your own leadership to be seen. And the most important thing is that you lead to lead people, but before you lead people, you need to serve them first. And through that frontline work, and you probably can have a new insight into a leadership role. And when you are not in that position, you have some aspiration, you have some expectations for leaders. So when you become that particular level in the leadership role, you will remember and do what you think or you thought and you observed when you are a follower. And the most important thing, last but not least, I think, is time. So you need some time to think over. So don't just work continuously, but you need some rest, you need some time to read, and some time to talk with people, and some time to attend conferences like this guy, so that you can enlarge your view, and so that you can know that what is your witness, and so that you can change it. And you're changing yourself, and you can change people. So I'd like to thank the organization to give me this chance to share my view. I love to answer any questions if there's any.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ho, for your teaching. And I hope by now we not only see the beauty by appreciating leadership, but also may be able to objectively describe what are the leadership aspects. Again, welcome any questions from the chat box. But perhaps maybe I can start with a question from myself, Dr. Ho. We know that QEH A&E is one of the busiest A&E, and especially given the fifth wave of COVID recently, it is very, very busy. But we are always surprised to see that trainees even though if they have promotional opportunities once they become a fellow, they don't leave QEH. They don't go and get an AC job in other departments. You talked about teamwork and you talked about coherence, but how do you do it? How do you keep your trainees, once they become a fellow, they still want to stay in the department? And how do you keep their well-being, despite these very challenging conditions in the last few weeks?
It's the first time I heard of that. People don't leave. I think some of the two speakers actually mentioned part of those answers that you want is about respect, and also allow them to do what they want. So you give some freedom. I remember Dr. J has mentioned this. So you have to allow some freedom for no matter it's a peer or subordinates to make their own reflection and make changes. So you cannot be a dictator in the department. You lead them to develop themselves. So you allow some freedom. Of course, you respect their changes. And some of our actually trainee residents, they do leave the department for their own purpose, like related to families, maybe some other opportunities. Like going for some other perspective. I think you have to respect them, and they are not leaving because you just want to know that they are not leaving because they hate the department, or the department is not listening to them, and so that they don't want to work with each other anymore. So I think sometimes you try to hold them tight, just a child, just your kids. You want to hold them too tight. They want to struggle and they want to leave it because they want some freedom. So you cannot hold them too tight and give them some airspace to breathe. And of course, opportunity is something that you need to develop, like specialty training, subspecialty training. I think as the doctors and nurses, when we go to for certain stages, they're still young. When people in Hong Kong get their get to a fellowship, they are in the early 30s. So they are still very want to learn more. So getting a fellowship, become a specialist in a specialty, is not the end of the career, it's just the beginning. So they might like something like psychology, some trauma, some administration, some hyperbaric medicine and pediatric, geriatric. So those are the opportunities you have to create so that they can still think that they can have an area for their further interest. So once they have the interest, they will stay. If they think that they learn anything and you don't have anything to offer to them, so they will try to find some way to go to enrich their own ego or super ego. So this is what my thinking. I don't know whether I answer your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Ho. Maybe just a follow-up. I think it was a very difficult time during COVID. Can you share with us how do you keep the team spirit during the very difficult times? Anything that you've done to keep them going? Because all the staff are working extremely hard, and I think the whole of Hong Kong can appreciate the work, of all A&E colleagues. Just wondering if you have any further thoughts.
I don't want to take credit for it. Actually, when in the height of this pandemic, I was already in my retirement leave. I actually left just before the Chinese New Year. I have to finish all my leave, but in the mid of February, there's a crisis going on in the department. I offered to come back to help in the front line. Okay, I'm not in the leadership role anymore because they have a new chief of service already. So I just want to offer to come back to work as frontline so that I can help. I understand, and you probably see, and many people in Hong Kong, many emergency workers in Hong Kong know that it's a very hard time for us in late February and early March. And so actually it's not my leadership's in the department, but subsequently, the hospital see a change, an opportunity for change. As you probably know, we have to embark on this journey of designated hospital, follow this example from what has done in mainland China. So my hospital executive asked me to help with this project of this designated hospital. So I get back to this leadership role again. So within the department, I have nothing to do during that difficult time. I'm just one of those who work hard trying to help patients, help colleagues. But now I'm in another positions to try to help the whole hospital to hopefully go through this stage. And now probably many of us are already in that stage now. That's the blessing of Hong Kong, and hopefully it's also happening in other areas, in other countries, so we can go away and get this COVID behind us in no time.
Thank you very
I'd
much
like
again.
to supplement a bit on Dr. Ho's experience. He shows a very good examples of the chance or the burden, maybe you can say, is to be given to a person, a good leader with good track records. That's why Dr. Ho is appointed to lead a very big project to change QEH as a designated hospital.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Jeffrey.